Hello and welcome to the Human Echoes podcast, the show where we review oddball movies, have oddball discussions, and occasionally take questions from you, the oddball fans.
I'm Tony Southcott.
I'm Albert Berg, and we're here today to talk about a movie that is the second in what we might call a trilogy from a director that we've reviewed before, Tony. We're talking about Green Room, directed by Jeremy Saulnier. I think that's how you'd pronounce his name.
Yeah,
he is the director.
If I had to guess, that would be it.
He's the director of Blue Ruin. You might have noticed a theme in the naming convention. I'm fully expecting Red Revenge to wrap this trilogy up or something like that. But Blue Ruin was sort of his debut. I don't know if it was the first thing that he directed, but it was definitely kind of the thing that put him on the map. A really, really masterful just a creation by him. And Green Room somehow, in my mind, managed to be even better than Blue Ruin.
Well, if you're talking about a movie that just throws tension at you, like Green Room definitely does that. Blue Ruin was really, really good, but it was also I was a little bit slower, a little more contemplative. And this movie is just like, shit is going down everywhere. Things are like it's pretty much nonstop.
And it doesn't abandon that feel that Blue Ruin had, where it feels very real. Every character in this feels like a real person. None of these people are cartoons or caricatures. The violence all feels very real, and there's not it doesn't feel like movie violence at any point. It's all very shocking and very horrifying. It feels like violence would feel in real life. There's no sort of like, yeah, that guy got his arm chopped off. It's like, oh my gosh, they hacked that guy 5 times with a machete and his arm is mangled, but it's still attached to his body. Ah!
Yeah, like that was some of the better prosthetic stuff I've seen in a movie in a while. Like just full on shock whenever he pulls his arm back in.
And I mean, there's a lot of that, and yet it's not, in my mind, it's not as much of a downer as Blue Ruin was. Blue Ruin just felt like, oh, this is kind of depressing. Green Room, by the time you get to the end, you're like, you know what? Like, a lot of people have died, and a lot of them were the good people, but I feel like that I'm happy for the people who survived. Like, they're definitely messed up, and they've definitely been through a lot of crap, and it has been a bad time for them, but it feels like they won a little bit more than Blue Ruin did. Not 100% win.
Do you think that might just be because of your own views on revenge, though?
No, because I think Blue Ruin went out of its way to sort of prop that up. Like, Blue Ruin was about how that revenge sort of steals your soul, essentially, and that's how he is at the end, right? I don't remember all the specifics, but it's not like, oh yeah, he got them, good. It just feels sort of empty at the end.
Yeah.
Whereas this is a lot more just about the tension of these people fighting off not an overpowering force. The great thing about this movie, which I've gotten too far into it. I want to do a summation. Green Room is about a band. Who's the name of the band? I forgot. No, I haven't. No, I'm going to think of it. Just a minute. Right. No, not right. The Ain't Rights.
Yeah, the Ain't Rights, which is a very punk rock band.
I had the word right, Tony. I was halfway there, but I had it in front. Gah.
It honestly reminds me of so many of the punk bands I used to go see. Like there's some that get pretty vulgar. Like my friends had a band called the Blistercocks, but most of them were like Bill the Welder or Guns N' Rosa Parks and things like that.
That's a good title.
Yeah. They were a decent band too back in the day. Like Tiger Army. I actually went to a punk rock show last night. It's not entirely punk. It's more like kind of Irish punk.
You tweeted a picture. That was not this kind of band.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of those shows that are just like, oh, this is a really crappy nightclub. Like, and we snuck in because we were 16 and we were drinking and I was knocking people over tables in mosh pits and things like that. I've been to a lot of those types of shows. This is at Red Rocks, which is possibly the best outdoor amphitheater on the planet. Rolling Stone thinks so anyway. And that was a lot of fun. That was flogging Molly. But we're talking about Green Room. We'll talk about that stuff later.
So this band is real down on their luck. I mean, they're pretty okay. That's the sort of bummer thing, is that these guys aren't bad. They just, it's hard being a musician and breaking out as an artist, and they are traveling around the country, sort of scraping by as best
stealing
they
gas
can
from other cars and all that, siphoning things.
I mean, the opening of the movie too is so great because it just kind of throws you in the middle of it, and yet it's not like an action opening. It's Anton Yelchin's character waking up in their bus, seeing corn out the window, not the band, the actual plant product, and realizing that their driver has fallen asleep and run off the road, and also the van has been idling this whole time, so they're basically out of gas, and they. You understand, oh, okay, these guys are just run down to the wire. They have no money. They're basically running on no sleep at the beginning of the movie, and they're just trying to get through and make it as a band. They get an interview with the guy. They've been driving 90 miles out of their way to get this interview, and he's just gotten fired from the magazine where he's going to publish it.
And they ended up playing at like a pizza place or something like that, like just doing this hardcore punk stuff in front of a bunch of kids.
It wasn't exactly, I mean, it didn't look like exactly a kid's restaurant. It just looked sort of like a quiet maybe not uptown, but like a basic restaurant where you'd go to just sort of have lunch, and not get screamed at by a punk rock band. And you can imagine, I mean, if I was doing that, I would die of embarrassment because I can't, it's hard for me to put myself out there like that. And yet they go at it. They're like, all right, well, this is our gig, so we're just going to play as hard and as loud and as good as we can. And there's a lot of respect for me for them. None of the people in this movie are stupid or lazy or like have these giant flaws that I think sometimes you get in these kinds of movies. And that really helps later on when the tension kicks in. And that tension kicks in real hard after they go to play a set at what turns out to be a neo-Nazi biker guy bar.
They stick to their musical principles and play the song Nazi Punks Fuck Off as their first song.
They did that just because they didn't like the Nazi. Like, they wouldn't have played that song otherwise. They played it specifically to give the middle finger to those guys. And I mean, you could tell that I guess those guys had enough respect for that where they didn't rush the stage and kill them all. Yeah,
there were a lot of people throwing beers and spitting and stuff like that. They just don't appreciate the dead Kennedys.
But then they get into their set and these guys are like, well, screw you for that first song, but you're pretty good. It's great that these guys are actually good at their job. They're not a terrible band like we saw in Moonwalkers.
Yeah.
But they get back to, they go to leave. They're getting packed up to leave, and they find in the green room that someone has been murdered by one of these neo-Nazis. And at that point, they all get shut into this room, and the movie kind of goes on from there as the neo-Nazis try to figure out the best way to contain the situation without, too much police interference, because they have a heroin lab underneath the bar, and probably that's where most of their money's coming from. And the band and the one neo-Nazi girl who was the friend of the girl who got killed try to figure out how to survive with the neo-Nazis outside, and the one guy's in the room. And there's a lot of, I mean, in a different movie, people would have just started kicking down the door and screaming and shooting and things like that. But there's a lot of talking in this that feels like a real, like they're how real people would deal with it.
Yeah, because you get to see this in the trailer. Like, you've got the one guy and he's saying, "You're not being kept here. You're just staying." Yeah. And you start seeing them try to get all semantic with their verbiage and everything. They're just trying to make sure that this punk band does not run. They don't necessarily know at that point if they need to get rid of them, but the Anton Yelchin and his band just know things are going to get really, really bad, and they start trying to take control of the situation for their own lives.
Well, right, and I think the fact that they don't go in shooting is really telling because, first of all, they call the boss, played amazingly by Patrick Stewart, and he takes control of the situation and says, okay, who knows where these guys are? Who knows where they're supposed to be? Like, if we disappear them, what's going to happen? Okay, we can't disappear them. We need to make this look like something else other than us just shooting them. So they can't just go in there and start shooting. They want to have, only flesh wounds that they can cover up with which I didn't get until the end of the movie. I don't know if it was just because I'm dumb or because it was supposed to be like a reveal, but that they were going to use their dogs to cover up this death and try to say that these people had trespassed in their property and these dogs had gotten them. And so you have this standoff where they're trying to, the band is trying to find a way out. The neo-Nazis are trying to figure out how to stage this in the right way so that it looks like they've been killed by these dogs instead of by them. And it goes on from there, and the tension just keeps getting ratcheted up, and Anton Yelchin gets his arm real bad cut up.
That might have been the only unrealistic thing that happened in here. Not that his arm got cut up in that way, because that was awesome, in that he just duct tapes it together and deals with it.
What was your problem with that? Did we think there would be too much blood loss?
The blood loss so that he wouldn't be as effective in anything else, and also like just the extreme pain. It might deaden and numb after a little while, but he got so messed up.
I think that the pain might have been not so bad because he did get so bad messed up. I think they might have severed some nerves.
Yeah, that's true, especially like once it got down to the hand level, because that hand is barely held on there. Right, and so I didn't have as much problem with that, and I thought he did a pretty good job acting out the sort of blood loss. Yeah, he was getting paler throughout the movie. He's never a superhero. It's never like he does something like, well, I couldn't believe that. It's like, oh, I've given plasma before. I know what it's like to have not as much blood as you're used to. He sure does look like he's kind of stumbling around and not 100% coherent. And as far as like the violence, nobody goes full superhero, but they establish that one of the characters like has done a lot of jujitsu and knows a little bit about fighting, and knows how to do a real rear naked choke. Yep, he puts on a real rear naked choke and puts on a pretty awesome armbar too. They actually have him, like one of the guys lay down and put him back in an armbar so they can put the gun on somebody else. Like just little weird things like that that happen in jiu-jitsu gyms, and I think it's kind of funny that they were able to bring that in. Makes me wonder if the writer actually has done a little bit of practice there and knows a little bit about the fight game, but he definitely used proper violence, proper chokes, all that stuff there to good effect. I really thought the portrayal of the neo-Nazis was really brilliant, because you hear the word neo-Nazi and they go into the bar and everybody has these shaved heads, and you're kind of expecting these roided out, like angry, rage-filled, not thinking type of people, and you quickly find out that none of these people, they're all very level-headed, very sort of taking their job seriously, and that to me made them that much more threatening, or maybe not more threatening, threatening in a different way though, threatening in a thinking man's tension game rather than a we're just gonna get shot way. Yeah, like they end up taking out all the guys that are just kind of base level or there for the concert, and they bring in these red lace guys that are just hard people. Like the types of guys that are kind of officers in the gang. So you know they're not going to be like losing their heads and going crazy with stuff. Right, and earlier on you even see that they get these, because at the very beginning the band manages to get off a 911 call, and you see that they deal with that because the one guy screamed about a stabbing, 911 called him back, and you know the guy who has the phone there thinks about it, he's like, all right, and he picks up and he's like, hey, a stabbing, right, you guys need to get down here, and finishes that call up, and then hires two of their younger members, like these two teenage boys, one of them to stab the other one with a knife, and he like plans it out. He's like, all right, this is under regulation, so you won't get busted for, felony weapons charge. If you go to jail, you get paid double. And they stage a stabbing outside the bar so the police won't come in looking for the real stabbing. It's incredible. Too. Just like standing there and his friend just shanks him. Yeah, I kind of like worried that they would go to a place where like that actually went a lot worse than I could see this director doing that, or he pokes an organ or something and all of a sudden he's just bleeding out there on the floor. But yeah, just having like sepsis or something. I think that would have maybe taken away from the real plot, but that would have been interesting to see.
But all these guys are just so calm, and the band too. Really, I mean, they panic a little bit.
Well, there's like a moment of shock. Like whenever they walk into the room, they see a knife sticking out of a girl's head on the floor. Like it's more of like a complete disbelief, and like it just overtakes them, and they're kind of stunned for a little bit. But they get through it and they build it up.
Well, right, and they do things like when the main neo-Nazi guy shuts the lights off, and so they're in the dark, and you almost never see a movie go completely dark. And I was thinking maybe because at that point they're in the room with the one neo-Nazi, they have the gun on him, and Imogen Poots' character, by the way, most hilarious name in movies,
Jim
Amber
Poots.
is her name. She lights a cigarette and hands it to the neo-Nazi guy, to hold in his mouth, and says to, the guy with the gun, he says, hey, if the cherry does something you don't like, you shoot him. And that just little moments like that made me think, oh wow, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. That guy is so intimidating too. Like, I know he's a fat guy, but he's also like probably like 6 feet, like 6'6" or something like that. He's just monstrously sized, and he's locked in the room with them. So you just have this menace like sitting there, and you're just waiting for the violence to kick off.
I don't want to go into the ending, although I will say having that dog walking around with the sound of that chain dragging was such a great touch towards the end. And I wondered, they showed, again, not to give too many specifics, but there's a point where they show the dog running off, and they hold on that shot for a long time. And then they keep cutting back to him, and I was like, oh, this is going to be something. And having that chain go along the ground was such a great choice. I'm not going to spoil how it resolves, but there is just such a great deft hand in making this film, down to, by the way, we mentioned this in Blue Ruin, Green Room also, incredible color correction work.
Yeah.
Where you almost always have that just little bit of a tinge of green, and it never feels unnatural, but it always feels distinct. It feels like, of course that thing there is green, but it feels like they just brought it out in just the right way for the sort of color-coded idea of the movie to work.
I'm trying to think of other directors that have had, like, these were his first 2 major movies. He had like a murder party thing that came out and a couple other things he directed. But to have such a deft hand in your second major film, like, it's incredible.
Not only that, first of all, I just realized Murder Party was a thing, and that looks amazing. Oh no, he just worked on, he did camera and electrical work.
Oh, it wasn't just that?
He was not the director.
Okay, sorry. Giving Jeremy Sauliner credits for things he didn't do.
I mean, he worked on it. It just wasn't the director. But he had enough foresight even to say, okay, I had a good hit with Green Room. That means I can get enough money to make a bigger movie. But if I get too big, he realized that if he was a heavy hitter, he might not be able to make a movie that was this tense and this sort of, violent in a way. And so he said, this is going to be my next movie because I have enough creative power to pull this off. And, it was just the right balance. Like, he couldn't have made this his first film, but he said, if I wait too long, I might not be able to make this, as a smaller type of a attention type thriller if I keep growing in popularity, which is just a weird amount of self-awareness to have. And maybe not accurate. I mean, I know that you could still make a smaller film as a bigger director, but it does seem like that he's thinking very seriously about not only the films he's making, but about the arc of his career.
Yeah, and I hope that he can keep making some of these smaller scale things too. Like, even if he has to do some of the funding himself, I'm sure they made a decent amount off of Green Room so far. It had a decent sized release. It had, like, it's doing well on the DVD circuit and everything.
I looked it up. It wasn't great. It was like $500,000.
Oh, was it? Maybe I just saw it in all the theaters here and thought that it did a little bit better.
I will look it up on Box Office Mojo, and we'll find out.
It's also a little bit propped up by the unfortunate timing of Anton Yelchin's death. Like, this is one of the last movies that we're going to see him in. He probably has a few that were in post-production. This is his last
headliner.
Yeah.
Like the last one that he was featured in. $3 million. I'm sorry. I thought I could have swore I read something lower than that. But anyway, by the way, A24 still killing it. The studio that released this, doing that great sort of smaller, weird film thing that you can swoop in. They're kind of, them and Blumhouse are really sort of doing the same thing. But A24
Sometimes
is
together.
Are they?
Oh, I've seen Blumhouse before A24. I thought I did.
Okay. And A24 is more of a distribution platform or studio, but A24 doing less of the horror and more sort of indie weirdness, whereas Blumhouse focuses quite a bit on horror. But still, it's good stuff.
And this movie's so visceral, you could almost call it horror in moments. I would definitely call it more of a thriller or suspense, but it has its moments where it gets there.
Yeah, it's like a thriller drama. I mean, there's a lot of talking and a lot of character work that I think goes unused and what is the word I'm trying to think of, Tony? I drank my coffee too early this morning. They don't do it. Not a lot of movies aren't this good. Is what I'm saying. This movie is good, and lots of other movies aren't.
And I'm glad
so
that
says
Al
Albert,
and I,
professional internet critic.
Al and I are actually in agreement over this one, so it's kind of refreshing.
It is nice. It is nice not to have to argue. I can't think of a single bad thing I have to say about this movie.
Maybe a little bit with the payoff question at the very end, but it didn't bother me.
I love that. You didn't like that?
I just like it was marginal for me, but it didn't hurt anything. So I
thought that was perfect. I was all pumped up to hear, and then she says what she says. I was okay. Credits, you guys.
But yeah, it's just a solid movie all around. I definitely recommend it. It's in Redbox right now, so if you have Redboxes around, it's worth $1.50. Like, seriously, support this movie. Go to the link at humanechoes.com and click on it, and you can get the pay-per-view. That actually helps the podcast. We get a little cut of that if you buy it through Amazon or rent it through Amazon. We get a cut either way. It's a seriously, seriously good movie, and you guys need to check it out. And check out Blue Ruin if you can.
Speaking of good movies and not that, we want to remind everybody, when this podcast comes out, you have 3 days left for Viewers' Choice Month nominations. Nominations close on the 15th.
And if it's past the 15th, go to humanechoes.com and vote on the movies that we're going to have to watch for September.
Yes, we're coming up on the voting process. Viewers' Choice Month nominations currently at the top of the page. All you have to do is go to humanechoes.com. You will find it. Let's dig into what they have nominated so far, Tony. We have
There's a lot. There's like 37 comments on that thread already.
Napoleon Dynamite, Tootsie, Manhattan, Mulholland Drive, Wet Hot American Summer, Transformers 2, Revenge of the Fallen, The Perfect Toast, Under the Skin, Pretty Persuasion.
Pretty Persuasion is a weird movie. We got like Paris Hilton, the Oogle Loves, like a bunch of stuff I haven't seen.
Somebody nominated the Oogie Loves?
Yep. Rich Alex nominated the Oogie Loves. Deathbed, the Bed That Eats.
I'm down with that one.
Troll 2, Evil Dead 2, Pitch Perfect 2 from Chris Becker, who's giving us the sequel ticket. Jen Gautreau, who was very, very instrumental in getting us to watch Rocky Horror last year, went entirely with the drag ticket. Like, I believe it's Tu Wong Fu. Let me find this real quick.
Well, I'll read some more while you're looking for that. David Webb says Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, which I started watching a while back and did not finish. I'd kind of like to read the play. Altered States and Scanners.
I want to see Scanners. I've heard lots of fun things about that movie.
Tiffany said Maximum Overdrive, which we've already reviewed. Sunshine, which we've talked about, but I don't think we've actually reviewed. And Awakening. Shadow of the Vampire, Chronos, and Long Kiss Goodnight. And wow, Rich Alex has a long comic that I'm not going to read all of.
But yeah, like the ticket that Jen is talking about, she nominated Tu Wong Fu, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which I think is Divine, and then Connie and Carla. So like we're getting a lot of tickets like that. Somebody's talking about The Birdcage, Dirty Harry, Odd Thomas, and Bernie. Like somebody's going to nominate that T-Rex movie, stuff like that.
Let Bernie go, you guys. It's Hillary. Okay.
Yeah.
He supported. He threw his not nomination. What do you call it? Support the thing. Endorsement. That's the word. He endorsed her.
And you can endorse all of these movies, the ones that you want us to review, after the 15th at humanechoes.com.
And if you have not, if you heard that whole list and you're like, I want them to watch something different than that, go now if it's before the 15th and nominate your choice.
While we're still on movie news and everything, like you were wanting to talk about that, the new Christopher Nolan movie, Dunkirk.
Well, just the trailer that came out. I mean, I have no idea anything about the movie, but the trailer aired. I saw it first, I think. No, I saw the news of it on on some movie news sites, and I think it popped up on YouTube, and I didn't watch it. And I went to see Suicide Squad that night, and they played that trailer in the movie theater. And my gosh, was that a great movie trailer.
Yeah, it's one scene from the movie. It's like 1 minute of all these people on a bridge outside of Dunkirk. The whole, like, this is giant 70 millimeter beautiful, like, footage, Christopher Nolan status. And you just hear the sirens on the front of on the planes coming up, and all you see are the soldiers ducking and trying to figure out what to do because they're just straight up trapped on this bridge.
But you see some really great cinematography for that too, where there's like bodies that are covered up and like being blown over by the sand, and all of this sort of destruction kind of after a battle. It looks like, I don't know exactly how everything's going to go, but that scene of the building sound of the planes and the guys like looking up one by one and then ducking down as the sound crescendos before the thing cuts to black and it just goes to the title was impeccable editing. As trailers as an art form unto themselves are such a weird and interesting things. I mean, we saw Suicide Squad, and I thought Suicide Squad, while I really enjoyed it, was a very flawed movie, but I couldn't say one bad thing about the first two Suicide Squad trailers. Those were just impeccable trailers, and it's really great when you see a good trailer that kind of nails it tells its own story. It's an encapsulated experience.
And whenever you have an action movie and you have Queen playing in the background, it's usually going to be a decent trailer.
There's more to it than that.
I know, it's
the
all
editing
cutting
on
and
those,
all that, but it's still...
The editing was really great. And it sold me on the movie more than... I think that after Batman v Superman, there was a lot of kind of... Am I going to stick with this DCEU? Or, well, no, what do they don't call it the EU. What do they call their thing? Anyway, their cinematic universe.
I actually think it is DCEU just because I've seen that a few times this week. Maybe that's not what everybody's calling it, but I've definitely seen that.
Why can't we just call it the cinematic? You're right. No, it is. So Marvel has the cinematic universe. DC has the extended universe. Why? Listen, I understand you want to set yourself apart. How about doing that by making really great movies, DC? How about that? Okay. The naming convention, maybe not so much.
Yeah. That's really hard, though, to make really, really great movies. DC is showing that.
Yeah, there's an interesting discussion, and I don't know how much it's warranted, but there's a lot of talk right now about Kevin Tsujihara, and how that DC has approached their movie-making process with David Ayer only having 6 weeks before Suicide Squad started shooting to write the script.
Yeah, that's we were talking about that a little bit in our Suicide Squad review, that it's just not enough time for a movie like this.
Maybe, on the other hand, something like, what was the movie where they were in the Cabin in the Woods? I was going to say where they were in the Cabin in the Woods. Like a moron. I'm pretty sure that script got written in like 2 days.
That's also that's in a novel story written like with a lot of other themes that are already present in a very small contained environment. You're not trying to capture the essence of characters that have been established since the like pre-80s.
Right. I'm just saying, like, I think you probably could write a good story in 6 months, but the idea of this cart being before the horse that, wow, we have this release date. We've hired you on. Apparently we don't have a good script, so better get cracking on that because holy crap, it's coming down on you. We're going to have to start shooting something. And not only just scripting, but before you start shooting, people are building sets. So a lot of that has to be done ahead of time. You can't, these big productions end up working kind of back to front sometimes, where somebody says, well, okay, we need this big set piece. And somebody's like, well, that doesn't really work in the version of the story that I'm writing. It's like, well, we already spent like $3 million building it, so it's going to go in the movie.
And more than all this, it still crushed it in the box office. So
it did. A lot of people are talking about like, oh, it's going to drop off. Drop off against what next week? Florence Foster Jenkins, which I'm going to go see. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to go see Florence Foster Jenkins. You will see a rundown on that unless something like happens.
I might end up going and see Sausage Party.
Sausage Party, again, I'm not knocking that. I'm probably not going to go see that. But
it's more my type of vulgar, hilarious humor. You can go watch the Meryl Streep Hugh Grant movie. I will go watch Sausage Party.
I just love that. I remember hearing the story of Florence Foster Jenkins on, I want to say it was This American Life, where they talked about just how bad she was, but she just loved to sing. And they had a recording of her singing some really famous aria that I don't know the name of, but if you played it for me, it's the one that plays in The Rocketeer. And she's so bad, and yet it kind of speaks to me about, creating art and passion, even when maybe talent doesn't go along with that passion. Pete's Dragon is not going to compete directly with Suicide Squad, I don't think.
What about Hell or High Water? I know it's not going to take a lot away, but it has 100% on the tomato meter right now. And Ben Foster.
Is that getting a wide release, though? Or is that one of those that's just sort of like, we're going to put it in like 5 theaters and see how it does?
I think it's going to be a little bit wider, considering that there was actually a trailer for it before Suicide Squad.
Okay. There wasn't for me.
Plus, you're talking about Chris Pine, Ben Foster, and Jeff Bridges. That's a pretty good top 3 lineup of people.
All right. I just know that I didn't get a trailer for it. I've just seen a lot online, and sometimes I get the impression that it's going to be a smaller...
And you might be right about that, but it looks like it's a smaller cost movie anyway, so I'm looking forward to that. I like heist movies. Ben Foster is one of my favorite actors. Jeff Bridges is one of my favorite actors, so I'm all over that. Chris Pine I like, but he's not at that level yet.
If it gets a decent release, Bloodfather might do something against Suicide Squad, but that seems like, again, it's not going to have that same big name draw. Suicide Squad is not going up against a lot of stuff that's really going to take the air out of it. So unless, and I think, this is only me, and I know a lot of people are disappointed with Suicide Squad, but I think that there's enough people coming out of it saying, yeah, I had fun, that people are not going to be as scared off as they were by Batman v Superman, which was just sort of like, oh,
and for me, it still has a 72% from the audience, and that's what matters more in these sorts of releases. You can have critics just destroy a movie, especially on a site that's binary where it's up or down like Rotten Tomatoes, but it still has like a 70, which is good.
And I've heard a lot of people, even I read after a lot of critics, and some of the people who gave it a positive review said, man, there's a lot of problems. I mean, I think I said that in my review, but I still enjoyed it. And some of the people who gave it a negative review said, listen, I liked a lot of stuff about the movie, but I couldn't overlook all the problems. So I think that while that binary thing kind of pushes it down in the same range as Batman v Superman, it's not as it's not as heavy on the negative. It's sort of like, it's rotten, but it's, you could probably still eat it. There's just like some rotten spots that you could peel around.
You
maybe
can make
like
banana bread out of it.
Exactly. That's the thing I was looking for, Tony. That's the joke.
It's a weird morning whenever I'm on top of it. Now isn't.
But seriously, I think Suicide Squad will have enough legs to at least do decent numbers next week. It's going to drop 50% plus, okay? Because with a $163 million opening, I can't imagine that it wouldn't.
That's just the domestic one. It broke 250 international.
But I'm saying it's going to drop off next weekend. Not as many people will go see it, but I don't think it's going to be like 30 million next weekend. I think it'll be like high 70s.
Yeah, I think it's going to be solid. It's not going, I don't know if it'll double its budget because it costs $250 million to make that movie. You're talking about for it to be considered successful, you have to have a $500 million theater run and probably more like 700 to 800 just so it covers all the other expenses and everything that goes along with it to get that gross money back and make a decent amount of money on top of it. I don't know if it's going to make that overall, but I think it's at least going to make its money back and make a little on top.
Well, and you need things like, the movies that make their money back, yes, they will have a big opening weekend, but you'll also have things like the long tail, right? Like The Secret Life of Pets. How long has it been since it's been out? 3 or 4 weeks now?
Something like that.
And it's still making $10 million per weekend, which they just count the weekend on the box office results. So on the daily numbers, I'm sure that's racking up. What you need is a movie that continues, it doesn't drop off all the way, that you have sort of, Tarzan did that. This podcast is not about box office results, but Tarzan, I think, while I don't think was the success the studio wanted, it was not the failure that I'm pretty sure everybody expected, because it just kept like, we made, another 15, 20 million this weekend, another 20 million next weekend, 10 million.
It was also up against a lot of big name movies. Like, you're talking about going up against Star Trek, against Lights Out, all sorts of other ones. And I know Lights Out's not the biggest movie, but that was, like, as far as box office, it pretty much crushed its budget. That was one that cost $3.5 million and made like 65.
Well, that's going back to that small budget, sort of small investment, bigger percentage return. I like those movies. I don't want to see the end of the blockbuster, though.
Yeah, true.
And I like a good blockbuster. I like a good blockbuster.
The problem is,
would you consider Dunkirk a blockbuster?
It depends on the scale of the movie and everything, because that's like saying, would you consider like Saving Private Ryan a blockbuster? It depends on how much effort and time they're putting into this movie. And it's Christopher Nolan, so it's going to be big. People are going to go see it. It's like Interstellar.
Let's go back in time and say, would you consider Interstellar a blockbuster?
I would consider like the hype around it up to blockbuster levels. The cast, everything about it suggests blockbuster.
I guess I think more big action when I think about blockbuster. Interstellar definitely has that sci-fi kind of thing going on, but generally to me,
see, I think of blockbuster a little bit differently. You're kind of thinking of more of those like big summer hit movies and everything like that, the big action stuff. I'm thinking of anything that costs a lot, has a fair amount of hype surrounding it.
Okay. I have my problems about Interstellar. I'm not trying to diss it and say, well, that wasn't a real blockbuster. It doesn't matter to me if it was that's not the important part. I mean, we just reviewed Green Room, which is definitely not a blockbuster, but holy crap, is it great. But I do like seeing those big budget. I mean, you need a big budget for a lot of these things that they want to do. And I want to see that kind of spectacle with a solid story to back it up. Studios, I know you think that people go for the spectacle, and to a certain extent they do. And yes, the Transformers movies are a thing, but I really believe in my heart, and I think you can back it up, that people generally want to see a better story. All right. There have been graphs recently, especially, that have sort of showed that audiences pretty frequently agree with how, the critics rate things. And if something gets trashed by the critics, it's probably because the regular people are also going back and saying, I didn't really like this that much, and not going again and not telling other people to go. Not
buying the DVD, not doing all that. I bet Suicide Squad makes up a little bit of their money with the merchandise. Like, I'm sure they're selling a lot of Dead Shots and Harley Quinn dolls or action figures. Yeah.
But they would have done that anyway. Yeah. I mean, maybe not Harley Quinn. I think Suicide Squad, this is not a Suicide Squad review, but man, did they nail Harley Quinn in my mind. I mean, I'm not a Harley Quinn fan. Maybe if you knew all her history, you'd be like, I don't think they got it right. But as somebody who's just kind of heard about that concept, I thought that was one of the things that could have so easily gotten screwed up. And between the performance and the writing on that character, really got her right.
Yeah. Especially compared to what they did with the Joker. But if you want to know more about Suicide Squad, go watch our review on that. I think we got to put a pin into that. Otherwise, we're going to end up talking about it for the next 20 minutes.
Here's what I want to talk about for a few minutes anyway. Are you listening to the new Malcolm Gladwell podcast, Tony? The Revisionist History?
I haven't had time, man. I've got 19 other podcasts I listen to, like literally 19.
Okay.
It's one that I should pick up, because Malcolm, I've read a couple of his books and I've enjoyed every book that I've read from him.
I like Malcolm Gladwell generally, especially his writing, but Revisionist History is making me not like him as much. It's so, yeah, he has a lot of interesting ideas. But my first real beef with him, well, I'll go back to the Granny Shot episode where he talked about why he did a whole episode about how that basketball players could be more effective with their free throws. They could be more accurate and hit more often if they shot underhand. The granny shot is what it's called in colloquial terms, although he doesn't use that because he's sort of, a proponent of it in that episode. He says it's more natural if you're doing a free throw with a granny shot. You're way more likely to hit. You improve your odds a lot, but nobody uses it because it makes you look dumb. And everybody sort of laughs at you and you kind of get flack for it. And I thought that episode was interesting, but what he doesn't address in that episode is that, and he uses that as a larger picture, right? For sometimes we don't do things because that would make sense because they would alienate other people. And a trend that I've noticed about him and these episodes is that he values logic over people. And that's something that I could recognize and I can understand from there was a point in my life when I would have done that as well. And sometimes I think I would still do it, but there's a reason why we as human beings have an aversion to doing stuff that other people think is dumb. And partly it's because our brains are wired to think if everybody else is not doing it, it might not be a good idea.
Oh, it's the fear of being ostracized. It's the fear of being kicked out of the tribe, basically.
Right. And the tribe is not a bad thing. I know that there need to be people who are trailblazers and things like that. But on the whole, humanity and our greater search for belonging is not a bad trait. It's what makes us strong. The fact that we sort of cover for each other and have each other's backs and, try to fit in with each other is a real good strength of humanity in my mind. And that kind of comes up again in the most recent one that he did, which was talking about the sudden acceleration in Toyotas, where he basically says, "Hey, it's not the car's fault; it's your fault. You put your foot down on the pedal," and never addresses the fact that the reason that people want to say that it's the car's fault is that because we want to think better of our fellow human beings. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to not want to blame other people and to want to find an excuse for them, their mistakes. It could be wrong.
It seems kind of irresponsible to not blame people for a lot of things, though.
But I'm saying, let's say something bad happens to one of my family members. My dad dies in a crash that involves a car. I think that there is something eminently human about me not wanting to believe that he was just too dumb to find the brake. Even if that was the case, first of all, that it couldn't happen, which is the argument that he makes, sudden acceleration is not a thing, can't happen. I'm here to tell you, it's happened to me. It can happen. Now, granted, I want to tell this story because it annoyed me that he was all like, it can't happen. This was in an older car. This was I had a 1985 Ford Ranger. And there was a point where I was driving across this big bridge that we have in our town. And all of a sudden, I think I had accelerated to pass somebody, and the accelerator just was all of a sudden stuck wide open. I mean, I took my feet off the pedals and everything, and it was going, like it was just, if you had floored it to the nth degree. And after a while of having it do that, the brakes did stop working because it lost vacuum. I don't know if you understand how cars work. If you have sort of a faulty vacuum already and it's not great, the engine does not produce as much vacuum when it's revving. It produces more vacuum when it's idling. And so the brakes ceased to be very effective, and I had to get off that bridge by shifting the engine into neutral and letting it rev for a while and coast, and then sort of once I got a little further, I put it back and go up to 90 miles an hour and then put it in coast for another, because I didn't want to stop on the bridge.
Yeah.
I wasn't panicked.
The last time, go ahead, sorry. Finish.
Well, I was just going to say, he makes the argument you panic when this happens. Was not panicked. I knew where the brake was. Had the presence of mind to get off the bridge and figure out how to get out of there. And I was calm. I solved my problem, but my brakes stopped working because of, my engine freaking out. And it wasn't some weird computer thing. I mean, again, this is 1985 Ford Ranger, but it did have a thing that broke in the throttle.
Those Toyotas, some of those Priuses were actually getting stuck down. It's verifiable. There was a recall. It wasn't just people. And they need to train people to put the car neutral. Because they're one of the people that was killed by it was a state trooper, a guy who literally is driving most of his time, while he's working. And
he had a rental, though.
Yeah.
And I think that was, and he did quote that statistic. And I am fully willing to believe that a lot of these, that the rental, he didn't understand how to put it in neutral. Once you're going 100 miles an hour down the highway, you don't want to take your eyes off the road. I understand that there is human error involved in this, but that I have experienced it myself, and I know that it's not all human error.
Yeah.
I took it to the shop. They found the problem. They had to replace a piece that was broken. I wasn't just because I had my foot mashed down the accelerator and I thought it was the brake, Malcolm Gladwell. Jerk. Sorry.
The last time I had an experience with brakes going out like you had, I was on a 4-wheeling trail, and we had gone through a bunch of water, so the brakes were already kind of waterlogged. And I'm just going down a mountain, not telling anybody in the car that I have no brakes.
I had several times when I first got my car, because my car that I have now, my Ford Tempo, because it had come from Chicago where there's a lot of ice on the streets and you end up with salted roads, the brake lines corroded, and twice I had the brakes, like the main brakes, go out, and I had to drive. One time it was not super far, but the other time I had, like, it was from the next town over. I had to drive home with like just the handbrake as my only brake, and like leaving a lot of room between me and the guy in front of me, and like eyeing that shift down lever real hard as soon as anything like put a brake on. I'm like, oh, down the first. So I have a lot of experience with crappy cars and brakes not working.
Yeah, it's a lot easier if you have a manual transmission too, and you can kind of use engine compression to slow down, but that's almost nobody has a manual anymore.
I mean, you can shift down to a lower gear and it won't go above that.
That's true. Like, you can definitely do it with an automatic. It's just not quite as intuitive or easy.
I mean, I knew that you could do it. Was pretty intuitive for me. In fact, you don't have to push the clutch or anything. You're just like, all right, shift down, and your engine all of a sudden is going like, okay, I guess we're stopping now. Wow. By the way, tip for you guys, if you're ever in a situation like that where your brakes go out, shift. Well, first of all, if you can shift into neutral, and can disconnect the engine. But if you need to stop faster than that, or if you're going down a hill and your brakes go out, shift down. And whether you're in a manual or an automatic transmission, the engine will help you stop.
Yeah,
or at least slow down.
If you're going 90 miles an hour and you shift it down to second gear, it's gonna suck.
Well, yeah, I mean, shift slower. I mean, you don't have to just throw it into the first gear initially. Although most transmissions at this point, especially your automatics, have a stop for that. I think even when I had that Ford Ranger, I had my paper route, and at one point a paper fell forward onto the shifter as I was going forward, and it just sort of like I think that there's a slipper in the, not a slipper like a shoe, but like something that sort of intentionally doesn't let you do something that extreme in the transmission if you try to shift that hard, because it didn't break it. Although later it did break. Anyway, I just wanted to put Malcolm Gladwell's feet to the fire, because I know a lot of people look up to him, and I look up to him, but he's not always right. And sometimes the logical answer is not as good as the human answer. That's my thought anyway.
And I'd agree for the most part.
I'm not saying we shouldn't know this. I'm not saying we shouldn't address that, like, hey, sometimes we humans will make a mistake because of our, we'll err on the side of giving our fellow humans a break and wanting to blame machines, because the machines aren't going to get their feelings hurt. Okay. It doesn't, like, but knowing that and just like chastising people for being wrong is a whole different bag of grits. I just pulled that one out of my head.
I was about to say, I don't think I've ever heard that expression before.
I know. You talk for a while and eventually you make up new sayings.
So while we're like getting off of this subject, have you been watching any of the Olympics?
Yeah, it's kind of nice to just like put it on in the background. It's a weird like phenomenon. It's odd too, because I go on Twitter and I see people tweeting about it, and I think, I kind of assumed that all y'all were too cool for this, but that's nice. I'm glad. Well, I don't know what it is about Twitter, but like everybody seems like, sports, we're better than all this mainstream stuff. And the Olympics comes on and we're all like, oh yay, the Olympics. I definitely have been watching it though.
I was having a few beers and watching the ping pong tournament happen, just because it's all about watching the serves, because they like stare down that ball like it's their greatest enemy, and it's so much fun seeing like just how goofy they get. Although I am kind of pissed, because every time I go to watch something, it's not what the description says. Like, I thought, oh sweet, I finally get to watch women's judo, which I like watching judo and everything, and it's rare that it's actually on TV. I get there and it's like water polo. And it's so bothersome to me that you can't watch like all these fight sports whenever they want to show like water polo. Who cares?
Well, especially if it says on your TV description, it's going to be this, then they should show that.
Yeah. And supposedly you can go online and get all the streams and everything, but I was just like, you guys lost me. And then I watched the U.S. basketball team beat China by like 55 points, and we got some good athletes.
Did you watch the swimming stuff last night?
I did not watch last night. I heard that there was a really awesome death glare that, that Michael Phelps gave out.
The commentators were so great on that. They cut to him in the green room, and I think it's the Brazilian guy who's up. He's in a green and yellow, and I think that's their colors. He's in a green and yellow jacket, and he's like getting up and he's like shadow boxing and like dancing around in front of Michael Phelps, and Michael Phelps is just like sitting in his chair behind him, like, I'm focused. I'm gonna go swim. I'm gonna go beat you so bad. I'm listening to my music right now. I'm not paying attention to you. It was such a like. He had such an intense stare. It was hilarious. This other guy's just like bouncing around like a goofball. He didn't win, by the way. The bouncing around guy finished like a full length behind Michael Phelps. And he could see that he cared a lot about where Phelps was because he kept looking over in the race like, whoop, where's he at? Whoop, whereas
and Michael Phelps only cares about those records and that gold.
And the announcers were saying, dude, you better stop looking at Michael Phelps and start looking at like swimming faster, because it doesn't matter where he is, you're going slow. But it was neat to see that kind of trying to play that psychological game with him, and Michael Phelps was just like, nope. I will not.
Wasn't that in a Michael or a Gladwell book? He was talking about Michael Phelps pre-game stuff, and one of the reasons why he's so good is that everything is just premeditated. It's exactly the same thing every time, the same set of music, the same lineup, the same like food the morning of. Like everything is so regimented that it's all just straight up muscle memory at this point. It's just like everything is perfect.
That sounds like something Gladwell would write, but I don't think.
It was either Gladwell or DeHig, like the guy. I think it might have been DeHig who did like The Power of Habit. Okay, well that sounds more like it then, because that's not from a Gladwell book that I remember, and I've read all the ones that I think unless he has a new one out that he's written. But he does write a lot about sports, and he writes some articles for the New Yorker and things as well. So it could have appeared elsewhere, but outside of one of his main works. Hold on one moment. There's actually somebody at my door. Weird.
Okay. Excitement on the podcast. What will Tony do? Who is it? Will he get murdered by an axe-wielding axe murderer? Oh, the door squeaks closed. Here he comes. Is it the murderer, or is it Tony?
It was FedEx with a very authoritative knock. It's like police style knock on the door. Always freaks me out a little bit.
Oh, I'm leaving all that in.
I don't know what happened.
I did want to wrap up the show today by mentioning that, you can trust us to be your source of all of the news about the asylum, Tony. I think people understand that that's a service that we offer.
Pretty much. Like, I think that's something like we might talk about it more than any other podcast for the asylum.
So I saw David Michael Latt tweeting out something that I did not know was on the horizon, and I've just recently found out. On the 16th, I forget what the name of the network is. I think it's Axis, which is spelled like AXS.
Yeah, it's one of Mark
going
Cuban's
to be airing
networks.
A film from the asylum called Elvis Lives. And here's the quote from Asylum President David Rimawi. Sorry. With Elvis Lives, we intend to do for the life of Elvis Presley what Sharknado did for flying sharks. I cannot wait to see what they're going to do here.
That kind of sounds like we need to do a bonus episode on it.
Are you willing to watch an asylum episode?
I'm willing to watch that particular asylum thing. Like, I actually have, or like, I can get to Access TV. We can make this happen, just because that sounds so bizarre. Like, we might actually have to like make a video for that. Like that sounds like something we should do.
There was a synopsis that had a little bit more information. I'm going to try to find that because I copied that quote over to my document that I always have open. Oh, let's see. So according to this is Billboard.com, the story goes something like this. Plagued by a heavy drug addiction and his failing voice, the king is desperate to make things right with himself, his deceased brother, and God. I don't know if God appears in this movie.
His attempts to get like he is God.
This is where it gets good. His attempts to get back on track are thwarted, however, after he helps the cops bring down a powerful crime syndicate, putting his family in danger and sending him on a journey that will change his life forever. I will be watching this. I don't know if I'll be doing a video afterwards, but it's a big possibility. I'm very excited. I'm not gonna lie.
I think
super
Mark Cuban's
excited.
like an Asylum fan. It seems like he does a fair amount with them. He was the president in their movie.
He was, and I think that was sort of when he got in contact with them. He realized sort of what their process was and what they did. And he's like, "Hey, go over here and make this movie for me. Thank you very much." I don't know if he has a good Elvis impression. It seemed like he had fun on that movie.
Yeah.
And that was the one of the best Sharknadoes.
Oh,
so.
he also just got to be badass president man. So it looked like it would have been fun to do his role. Just grabbing like dual guns and sliding around.
Here's a quote from Cuban. Not any Cuban, Mark Cuban, not somebody from Cuba. Just clarify.
Random Pablo guy, you know.
I went to Cuba and, what do you think about Elvis Lives? And he said, the random Cuban said, they're the perfect fit to bring this wild ride to life as we celebrate the life and legacy of the king's reign, crafting a unique and original storyline that explores the well-known conspiracy theories and allows our viewers to form their own conclusion. I don't believe that last bit at all.
Yeah, that sounds like canned CEO speech. Like that sounds like he might not have actually watched it yet.
That's okay. I'm still excited. I saw the trailer. It looked pretty bad.
Yeah.
But like in a good way, like we're going to make a really cheap Elvis movie.
One of the things I've always liked about Mark Cuban is he's done a lot for mixed martial arts and not so much for the UFC, but for MMA in general. Like he's put a lot of these smaller shows onto the Access Network. And it allows the fighters on those shows to get paid thousands of dollars more than they would, because a lot of times it'd be like $500 to show, $500 to win for these smaller shows, and this allows those guys to make a little bit more off of that. They're putting their they're putting their bodies up there, and facing down permanent damage. They should get paid a little bit more than what the smaller venues can give. So it's good for them to have a venue to go to where they can actually get some televised time and possibly work their way up to the UFC levels.
And with that, I think we're going to be done for this week, Tony.
I think so. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you really enjoy this podcast and you want to get more awesome podcasts, especially our bonus podcast that is always with Joe, that is one of the funnest things we get to do. Go to humanechoes.com and become a member. I guarantee you that your $2, $5, $10, or $20 a month will help us out more than pretty much anything we can get from like YouTube or any of these other places. It goes a long way. That membership helps us keep the lights on here, helps us get making better content, helps us go to new movies so we can tell you about the greatest stuff that's out there right now. Becoming a member is the best way to support us. Another great way you can support us is by clicking on the Amazon link. Like we talked about earlier, the link to Green Room will be at the bottom of this episode if you go to humanechoes.com. And you'll be able to click that. If you click through for the affiliate, anything you buy from Amazon for 24 hours, we get a cut of. It's a great way to support us. It doesn't cost you anything extra.
And next week, we will be reviewing a new film coming to Netflix. Not a new film. Okay,
yeah, it's from 2007, 2008.
But it's coming to Netflix for the first time in a little while. We're going to be talking about No Country for Old Men, possibly the most fun and successful Coen Brothers movie. Although
I don't know if you can call it the most fun, but it's definitely.
Oh man, you don't like people getting killed. And
I enjoy the movie, but like fun isn't the. I guess it's more fun than like The Road, but I don't consider that movie to be like a popcorn good time. Anton Chigurh.
Okay, so the other one that I can think of that's a really big hit was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun.
I mean, they're generally. They have a weird sense of comedy. You know what? We're going to review the movie when we get to it. So,
anyway, thank you guys very much for listening. See you next week.
Bye.